Today I'm going to show you how to make a pinch cup. So I'm starting with some wedged clay, and I'm going to wrap that clay up. It's about the size of a mandarin orange, roughly, a little bit bigger probably. And what I'll need to do is shape that into the shape that I'm going to want the cup to start in. So thinking about the size of the base and using my hand as a mold that I'm pounding the clay into gently. Not pounding, but shaping. So I turn it as I'm shaping that into my hand, and that is going to be kind of like centering if I were on the wheel. Now, that's a good start. It has a good start to the shape. And now I'm going to come down here and I'm going to tap where I want my foot to be, and that's going to just be a good guideline of where to not pinch. Now, the next step is going to be to make a hole in the center. So I'm going to take my thumb and I'm going to press it in, but not all the way down to the bottom. You know, just maybe leaving about a 1/4 to a 1/2 inch bottom. And so this is what that looks like now. And now I'm going to pinch my fingers together. And when I pinch, the clay is going to move upward. So I'm going to pinch with my thumb pressing into my fingers. And the angle of my hand is going to dictate which direction the clay goes in. So if I'm holding my hand like this, obviously the clay is going to go right out. If my hand is going like this, it's going to go in. But if I want it to go kind of up and out just a little bit, I want to hold it like that. And I'm pinching, but at the bottom, moving that clay up, but turning it in a circle. And I go around, moving up just a little bit each time. Some of the mistakes that I see students do are maybe pinching really hard and or not starting with a good shape to begin with. So remember that shaping in the beginning is really important. And then not pinching too hard. If you start out light and it's not really going anywhere, you can increase the pressure, but it's good to start just a little on the lighter side. This is what it looks like right now. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is, I've got a couple tools here. I've got a sponge, a needle tool, and this red rib. This red rib I like because it's flexible. And I'm going to take the round side of it and I'm going to press into my other hand, kind of in a circular motion. And what that's going to do is it's going to compress the inside and smooth it too. Now I'm going to, looking at my walls, they look a little thick, so I'm going to just thin that out a bit by using my thumb and kind of squishing the clay upward. I don't want to go too thin. And really what I'm kind of doing at the same time is I'm moving the clay from the recessed areas where I was pinching into the raised areas, also from pinching. I'm going to come back in, kind of working back and forth. And now when I'm pushing out a little bit more, using that round side of my rib, it's thinning this wall and making it more consistent. Now, I'm going to flip that over and I'm going to work on the foot. So I'm going to start with my thumb in the center and I'm going to pinch towards the edge. So it's just like when I was making the actual pot, only I flipped it over, it's going to be much smaller, and this is to make the foot. Now I want to see how thick that foot bottom is. So I'm going to press my needle tool in, kind of like you would do to check your oil, and it's pretty thick. It's still about a 1/4 of an inch thick. So I'm going to go back down and I'm gonna move that clay more up to create that foot. I want a nice strong foot, nothing too flimsy. And now I can do the same thing from the outside. I'm just moving that clay up towards or down, depending on how you think about it, to make that foot. And that's the great part about clay, is that clay moves, and you can do that. Now, I'm going to just very carefully use my fingers to move that clay around a little bit. Now, if it's a little thin in a spot, I can come over to my covered up clay and take out a little piece, and I can have that handy to add in any like little thin spot that might exist in there. Now the thing about this foot is right now it's really wet and it's not very big, so if I just flip this over, it's going to make that foot get really flimsy, maybe smush it, make it uneven. So I can flip it over just a couple times to thicken it and to make sure it's flat, but then I just want to come back in and make that a nice clean line. I would then take this and I'd let it set up for a while. And by set up, we're talking about clay, we're talking about letting this, because it's so wet now, it's so flimsy now, it needs to set up to get to something called leather hard, and that is the strongest the clay will be before it gets fired. So how long does that take? Well, there's very many variables involved in that, depending on how wet it is in the air, or how hot it is in your house. So just all these different parts of it could change that. So my suggestion is to take a hunk of plastic and make sure it's sitting on plastic and kind of cover up that bottom, what's going to be the lip, and let that foot set up and check it every like half hour to make sure that it's still wet enough. And then once it gets a little bit stronger, you'll be able to flip it over and start working on the other side, building up. I have one that I already started earlier that I let set up for a while, and so I want to show you what you can do to kind of clean up that foot line. I'm just taking my sponge and I'm kind of putting the lip in there like that, and that is moving some of that clay so that it looks really nice and consistent. Now, this is still wet up here, but down here it's gotten much stronger because it is at leather hard. I'm going to come back in here and I'm going to use the round side of my rib, and you may notice I'm not using any water. People kind of get a little over enthusiastic with the water use when it comes to clay, and if water drips down to the center of this, it can actually cause cracking down the road and other issues. So you want to be careful and mindful of that. So right now what I'm doing is kind of pushing that bottom out to make sure it's not too thick, and also because I'm compressing it, as you remember. All right, now the next step for me to make this larger cup is I'm just going to wet that lip, and I'm going to grab some of my clay. I'm going to make a coil. Now the two different ways that I make a coil, one that I usually work on in my own studio is to roll the clay between my hands, my palms, until it becomes about a ½ inch thick in diameter, and then I let it drop down, and I do that all the way up to the top. And that makes a pretty consistent coil for me, but I have noticed sometimes students struggle with that method. So now I'll show you the other way. I kind of start just by getting it moving, and then when I roll it on the table, I will start in the center and then span my fingers out to the edge. Start in the center and roll my fingers out to the edge. And that makes a nice coil as well. Now, I'm going to flatten this. And it's not flat like a pancake. I'm just using the heel of my hand. I'm making it about the thickness of the lip I'm attaching it to. I'm gonna make sure there's not water in there. And I'm gonna take that coil, it's about that thick, about the same as the cup itself, and I'm not gonna put this on top. I know that's the way it's often taught in high schools and stuff, but, and that's fine if you're slipping and scoring between each coil, but we're not doing that this time. We're gonna put it down just a little bit, maybe 1/8 of an inch from the top on the inside. And I just slowly bring that around. It doesn't have to be the exact size of the cup. Again, just pinched off the other part and I let it overlap a little bit. Now I'm going to go on the inside and I'm going to push the clay down on the inside while giving it support from the outside. Now if I use a lot of water, this is going to be very difficult because there won't be any friction to move the clay. So on the inside, I'm pushing that down, and on the outside, I pull it up. And what happens when I do this is it kind of countersinks it, I suppose, in a way. It keeps the walls exactly the same. There isn't air trapped between those two sections. And there. And get that all connected. And then I can come back in and just make sure everything is really well connected. I know this may be different than a way that you were taught, and honestly, it's different than the way I was taught as well, but it works really well. It just eliminates cracking and things. So now I'm gonna come back in and use this rib again. On the inside, I'm using the round side, making sure not to leave water in the bottom. On the outside, I'm going to use the flat side, and I'm going to bend it so it matches the contour of the clay. And you can see I'm kind of pulling up at an angle. This is the start to my cup. I'm probably going to have to put a coil or two on and then come back and after letting it set up again, because it is really, really wet. So I'll probably put a few more coils on, but not at this minute. This will have to set up maybe for an hour. And while I let this set up, I will take another hunk of plastic and keep that lip wet while we let the bottom underneath it set up. So I want that lip to stay wet enough to attach another coil, but I want everything underneath it to set up to leather hard or close to it where I can still move that clay on the surface, but that I can still add to it. And that's the start of the cup.